My troubled sister cheated Christmas, called her gifts trash, and forced my parents to sell everything, before finally sending her away for treatment. My sister was 5 years old when she first tried to gouge out my mother's eyes in public, all because she was told no to the doll she wanted. This wasn't her first outburst, though. She was diagnosed with oppositional defiant disorder at 3 years old. As a result, for her entire childhood, my parents did anything she wanted to avoid her becoming hostile. They let her make the decisions for every single family dinner, outing, and holiday. Everything was exactly how she wanted it. It was strange seeing my parents too scared of an 8-year-old girl to tell her no, but that's how life was for a few years. Eventually, they decided to put their foot down when she was 12. My sister demanded a $900 iPad because her friend had one. My dad explained they couldn't afford it. She responded by taking his military jacket and cutting it to shreds with scissors. My dad was crushed, but instead of caving, he held firm. That's when my sister switched tactics. She looked my mother dead in the eyes and said that if they didn't buy her what she wanted, she'd tell her school counselor they didn't feed her. My parents went pale. The next 6 months were hell. My parents tried to balance not giving in completely while avoiding her threats. They bought her some things, but not everything. Of course, it wasn't enough for her. She finally made good on her threat when our parents took us on vacation to a different resort than the one she wanted. I remember coming home a month later to find a Child Protective Services worker in our living room, taking photos of our full refrigerator and pantry. My sister sat on the couch with fake tears streaming down her face while the worker asked questions. The investigation lasted 2 weeks. The worker found designer clothes in my sister's closet and noticed how she kept changing her story about when she was supposedly starved. The case was closed with a note about inconsistent statements from the minor, but the damage was done. This all led up to this past Christmas morning. I had asked my parents for a new phone since mine was cracked and barely working. My sister told our parents to surprise her, nothing else. So they did. When Christmas morning came, I unwrapped an iPhone 13, as well as a few small things like socks and deodorant. Then it was my sister's turn. She received a small Louis Vuitton bag, Gucci perfume, the shoes she'd been eyeing for weeks, and even a professional makeup palette. Yet each time she opened something, she'd roll her eyes and toss it aside like it was garbage. After all the gifts were opened, she didn't even say thank you. She just went upstairs and came back 25 minutes later with her phone calculator out. She'd looked up every single price and added them up. Then she looked up my phone's price. Her total was $75 less than mine. She stood there yelling about how this was proof she was the black sheep in this house and I was the spoiled golden child who always got everything. She had the audacity to go into the kitchen while Mom was cooking Christmas dinner and try to take the wallet out of Mom's pocket to find $75 in cash to make it even. My parents, who by this point were completely sick of her, refused to do it. Mom told my sister she wasn't getting money and there would be consequences if she tried. My sister's face immediately turned red. She screamed that her presents were basically trash that she didn't want anyway. Before anyone could even react, she grabbed my new phone off the coffee table and spiked it against the wall like a football. The screen shattered, and pieces flew everywhere. The room went silent. My dad stood up slowly. He's a big guy and a former Navy SEAL who never raises his voice. When he yelled her name, I swear the walls shook. It was the first time I had ever seen her afraid of consequences. She ran to her room and slammed the door. I picked up the pieces of my phone, almost crying, while my parents began whispering intensely in the kitchen. About an hour later, they came out of the kitchen with determined looks on their faces. They went to where my sister's presents were still scattered on the living room floor and started gathering them up. I asked them what they were doing, and they said what they should have done a long time ago. Before I even knew what was happening, they were listing all of the items on the Facebook marketplace. Within 3 hours, everything was gone. The bags sold instantly. Someone drove an hour for the perfume. They'd made back every penny, plus some extra from the designer items selling above retail. My sister was still upstairs, so they called her down. She came down holding a pair of scissors, which my dad physically forced her to hand over by restraining her and taking them. This happened in the hallway, meaning she was already furious. Then she walked into the living room. She saw that her presents were gone, and there was a stack of cash on the table. But there was also one more thing. A website on the computer screen for a treatment facility for difficult teenagers. "What the hell is this?" she shouted. "Shut up and listen," Dad interrupted. "This is where you'll be spending the next 3 months, starting next week." My sister's face went pale. "This stack of cash on the table is to cover the phone you broke. Now pick it up, hand it to your sibling, get upstairs, and don't come down until you're told." He didn't move. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides, knuckles turning white. The scissors Dad had taken from her left a red mark on her palm from how tightly she'd been gripping them. "You can't send me away," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "I'll tell everyone you abuse me." Dad crossed his arms. "Go ahead." "We've documented everything. Every threat, every lie, every manipulation. The CPS report is on file, showing your inconsistent statements." Her eyes darted to the cash on the table. Before anyone could react, she lunged forward, knocking the laptop off the table. It crashed to the floor, the treatment facility website still glowing on the cracked screen. I tried to grab the money first, but her nails raked across my face. Sharp pain shot through my cheek as blood welled up from 3 deep scratches. Dad moved fast, grabbing her wrists and pulling her back while she thrashed and screamed. Mom rushed to the kitchen and came back with paper towels for my face, then picked up her phone. "Yes, hello, this is Catherine Williams. We spoke last week about enrolling our daughter," Mom said, her voice staying calm despite the chaos. "I wanted to confirm the intake date for January 2nd. The transport team arrives at 8 a.m. Perfect." When Mom hung up, my sister's whole body started shaking, not from fear, but from pure rage. Dad released her wrists and stepped back, ready to grab her again if needed. "Get upstairs," he said. She backed toward the stairs, never taking her eyes off us. "You'll regret this," she whispered. "All of you." The next morning, she didn't come down for breakfast. Mom left a plate outside her door, but it remained untouched. Around noon, we heard groaning from upstairs, loud, theatrical groaning. My stomach, she moaned when Mom went to check. "It hurts so bad. I think I need the hospital." She writhed on her bed, clutching her stomach. Sweat beaded on her forehead, which seemed suspicious since her room was freezing. Mom studied her for a moment. "Okay, let me cancel your reservation at Romano's for tonight. If you're too sick for the hospital, you're definitely too sick for your favorite restaurant." The groaning stopped instantly. My sister sat up, miraculously cured. "I feel better now," she said quickly. "Must have been gas." Mom turned and walked away without a word. That afternoon, our house phone rang non-stop. First Grandma, then Aunt Catherine, then our other grandparents. Each time, Mom or Dad would answer and have the same conversation. "Yes, we know she called you. No, we're not starving her. Remember the CPS investigation? The one where she lied?" By the 5th call, I realized what she was doing. She'd spent hours calling every relative with sob stories, trying to turn them against our parents, but they'd already briefed everyone after the CPS incident. No one believed her anymore. Around dinner time, she tried a different approach. I caught her in Dad's office, frantically clicking on his computer. "What are you doing?" I asked. She spun around, guilty. "Nothing. Get out." But I'd already seen the screen, security camera footage from Christmas morning. She was trying to delete the video of her smashing my phone. "Dad already backed that up," I said, to 3 different drives, in the cloud. Her face twisted with frustration. She shoved past me and stomped back upstairs. Day 2 started with Mom's scream from the kitchen. "My credit card is missing." We found the card number typed into a hotel booking site on my sister's laptop, which she'd left open. The reservation had been declined due to a fraud alert. Mom called the credit card company while Dad confronted my sister. "I wasn't running away," she insisted. "I just needed space to think." "In a hotel 3 states away?" Dad asked. She didn't have an answer for that. By afternoon, she'd moved on to recruiting allies. 3 of her friends showed up at our door, led by a girl named Jamie, whose parents followed close behind. "We're here for an intervention," Jamie announced. About the abuse, the parents looked uncomfortable. Jamie's mom pulled my mom aside. "I'm so sorry about this. Jamie insisted we come, but we wanted to verify what's really happening. She said you're sending your daughter away." Mom explained everything. The oppositional defiant disorder diagnosis, the years of manipulation, the broken phone, the treatment facility. The other parents nodded knowingly. "We've noticed the behavior at school," one said. "The lying, the threats to other students. We understand completely." The intervention dissolved quickly after that. My sister watched from the top of the stairs as her last allies abandoned her. That evening, I went to grab a snack from the kitchen and heard strange noises from the bathroom. The door was cracked open. Through the gap, I saw my sister hunched over the sink with her makeup spread across the counter. She was pressing purple eyeshadow against her arm, blending it with black to create realistic-looking bruises. I pulled out my phone and started recording. She photographed her handiwork from multiple angles, muttering about how these would prove the abuse. When she finally noticed me filming, her face went white. "Delete that," she demanded. "No," I said, backing away. "Mom and Dad need to see this." She chased me down the hall, but I made it to my parents' room first. They watched the video in silence, then added it to their growing documentation file. On the third day, December 31st, she pulled out her biggest weapon. Mom found the note on the kitchen table after lunch. "I can't take it anymore. By the time you read this, I'll be gone. You pushed me to this." Mom's hands shook as she read. Dad called 911 while searching the house. They checked her room, the bathrooms, the basement. I remembered the attic access in the garage and pointed it out. We stood below, calling her name. Silence. Then her phone chimed, a text notification, clear as day from above. Dad pulled down the attic ladder and climbed up. She was huddled in the corner behind Christmas decoration boxes, very much alive and scrolling through her phone. "Get down," he said simply. She climbed down slowly, caught. I noticed something odd about the suicide note. It mentioned, "After the facility takes me away," but she'd written it before she was supposed to leave. "You wrote about things that haven't happened yet," I pointed out. She snatched the note and tore it up, scattering pieces across the garage floor. January 2nd arrived like any other morning, except for the white van parked outside. Peaceful Paths Transport Services was written on the side. 2 people stood at our door, a woman with kind eyes and a man built like a former linebacker. My sister had barricaded her bedroom door with her dresser. We could hear her inside shouting, "If you come in, I'll hurt myself. I'll do it," I remembered. All her previous threats. "Check her Instagram," I suggested. She always posts when she's really upset. Mom pulled up her profile. Posted 45 minutes ago was a selfie with perfect makeup and the caption, "New Year, New Me." Dad looked at the transport team. "She's bluffing." The male transport worker nodded. "We see this often. Mind if we handle it?" They'd done this before. While the woman kept her talking through the door, the man quietly removed the hinges. The door lifted away cleanly, revealing my sister pressed against her dresser. "No," she screamed. "Help! Someone help! They're kidnapping me!" She ran to her window, throwing it open. Our neighbors, the Benjamins, were in their yard. "Call the police," she yelled. "They're taking me against my will." Mr. Benjamin looked up, saw the transport van, and simply went back inside. They'd lived next to us for 10 years. They knew. The transport team remained calm, packing her belongings while she raged. As they led her outside, she pulled out her final card. "Look," she showed the woman her phone. "These are bruises from where they hit me." The woman studied the photos professionally. "Those are makeup," she said gently. "We can tell the difference. We've seen this hundreds of times." My sister's face crumbled. For the first time in years, real tears fell. Not manipulation, not performance, but genuine tears as reality crashed down. She was actually leaving. Her actions had consequences. The games were over. She looked back at the house as they helped her into the van. Mom and Dad stood firm in the doorway. I watched from the living room window as the van pulled away, feeling a strange mix of sadness and relief. That afternoon, my parents sold the last of her gifts online. The money covered my phone replacement with enough left over to start a therapy fund for when she returned. The house felt different, quieter, but somehow more alive. We ate dinner at the table instead of in separate rooms. We watched a movie together without anyone screaming about the selection. For the first time in over a decade, we felt like a family. The peace lasted exactly 4 hours. That's when the first email arrived. Mom's laptop dinged while we were still cleaning up dinner plates. She opened it casually and her face went pale. Dad leaned over to read and his jaw tightened. "What is it?" I asked. Mom turned the screen toward me. An email from my sister's account sent from her phone. The subject line read, "Evidence of abuse. Please help." Below were the fake bruise photos she'd taken, along with a lengthy message detailing supposed years of physical and emotional torment. The recipient list made my stomach drop. Every teacher at her school, the principal, 3 different CPS offices, and what looked like dozens of random child advocacy organizations. Dad immediately called the transport team. The woman who answered sounded unsurprised. "She still has her phone," Dad said, his voice strained. "We thought you'd confiscate it. We don't take personal items during transport," she explained. "But don't worry, we've already contacted the facility. They're aware of the emails, and will handle it appropriately when she arrives." Handle it appropriately offered little comfort, as Mom's laptop continued dinging with responses. Most were automated replies, but a few concerned teachers wrote back asking for clarification. Mom spent the next 2 hours crafting careful responses, attaching the video I'd taken of my sister applying the makeup and referencing the previous CPS investigation. The next morning brought a new crisis. Dad discovered his business credit card was missing from his home office. A quick check of the account showed attempted charges at 5 different hotels, 3 car rental agencies, and, bizarrely, a wedding dress boutique. All declined thanks to security protocols. But the pattern was clear. She was trying everything possible to escape. How did she even get the card? Mom wondered aloud. I remembered something. Yesterday morning, when you were confirming the transport arrival time, she asked to use the bathroom, the one connected to Dad's office. Dad rubbed his temples. She must have grabbed it then, probably planned to use it during transport. We spent the morning on hold with various companies, explaining the situation and adding extra security measures. Each conversation felt like reliving the nightmare. Yes, our teenage daughter stole the card. No, we don't want to press charges. Yes, we're getting her help. Around lunch, our doorbell rang. A woman in a suit stood on our porch, holding a tablet and looking concerned. Mr. and Mrs. Williams, I'm Sarah Chen from Child Protective Services. We received some concerning emails last night. My parents exchanged exhausted looks. Mom invited her in, and we went through the whole story again. The oppositional defiant disorder diagnosis, the previous false report, the treatment facility, the makeup bruises. Ms. Chen took notes, asked to see the video evidence, and examined the documentation my parents had been collecting for years. I appreciate your transparency, she said finally. Given the previous investigation and the evidence you've shown me, I'm marking this as a follow-up to the closed case, but I am required to do a home inspection and interview each family member separately. The inspection took 3 hours. She photographed every room, checked our food supplies again, and asked me detailed questions about home life. I told her everything. The years of walking on eggshells, the Christmas morning explosion, the scratches still healing on my face. She documented those too, noting they were clearly defensive wounds. One more thing, Miss Chen said as she prepared to leave. Your daughter sent emails to multiple agencies. You might receive more visits over the coming days. I'll add notes to the system about what I found, but each agency operates independently. She was right. Over the next 4 days, we had 2 more CPS workers, a police officer following up on a kidnapping report, and even a private investigator, hired by someone my sister had convinced online that she was being trafficked. Each visit meant retelling the story, showing the evidence, explaining the situation. Our neighbors started asking questions about all the official vehicles in our driveway. The facility finally called on day 5. My sister had arrived safely but was refusing to participate in intake procedures. She barricaded herself in the assessment room and was demanding to speak to a lawyer. This is actually quite common, the intake coordinator assured my parents. We have protocols for this. She'll be assigned a patient advocate who will explain her rights and the program structure. Most residents accept the program within 48 hours once they realize the alternative is a longer stay. But my sister wasn't most residents. The next update came 2 days later. She had convinced 3 other new residents that the facility was illegally holding them, and organized what the coordinator delicately called a disruption. They'd refused to attend group therapy and staged a sit-in in the cafeteria. We've seen this before too, the coordinator said, sounding less confident than before. We're implementing individual intervention strategies. Mom hung up, looking drained. Maybe we made a mistake. Maybe she needs a different type of help. No, Dad said firmly. This is exactly why she needs to be there. She can't manipulate her way out of consequences anymore. The calls from family members started again that evening. This time, she'd managed to contact them from another resident's phone. The stories were more elaborate now. Forced medication, solitary confinement, denial of basic necessities. Aunt Catherine called in tears, begging my parents to reconsider. She sounded so scared, Catherine said over speakerphone. Are you sure this place is legitimate? Mom pulled up the facility's website, showing their accreditation, success stories, and transparent policies. They don't use solitary confinement. They don't force medication. She's lying, Kath. Just like she lied about us not feeding her. But what if this time? This time is no different, Dad interrupted. She's doing what she always does, and everyone falling for it is exactly why she never learned to stop. Catherine hung up, unconvinced. Within an hour, she'd posted on Facebook about her poor niece trapped in an abusive facility. The comment section exploded with outrage from people who didn't know the full story. Mom's phone buzzed with notifications until she had to turn it off. I watched my parents age years in those few days. They barely slept, constantly checking their phones for updates from the facility or new crises to manage. Dark circles formed under their eyes. They jumped every time the doorbell rang, expecting another official visit. On day 8, everything escalated. The facility called with news that my sister had filed a formal complaint with the state licensing board. She'd somehow memorized the complaint hotline number and convinced a staff member she needed to make a private phone call for a family emergency. The state will investigate, the coordinator explained. It's routine when complaints are filed. We're confident in our practices, but I wanted you to be aware. That same afternoon, a process server knocked on our door. My sister had managed to contact a legal aid organization and file for emergency custody modification, claiming she was being held against her will and requesting to be placed with Aunt Catherine instead. Dad laughed bitterly as he read the papers. She's 16. She can't file for custody modification. The process server shrugged. I just deliver them, sir. You'll want to contact a lawyer. So they did. The lawyer, a tired-looking woman named Ms. Martinez, reviewed everything and sighed. The filing is nonsense, legally speaking, but you'll still need to respond. And if your sister-in-law is willing to take custody, she's not, Mom said firmly. Catherine lives in a studio apartment and works 60 hours a week. She's just emotional right now, then this should be dismissed. Quickly, Ms. Martinez said, but I recommend documenting everything, every call, every email, every interaction. As if we weren't documenting enough already, Mom started a new notebook specifically for post-facility communications. By the end of the first day, she'd filled 10 pages. The facility called again on day 10 with good news and bad news. The good news, my sister had finally agreed to participate in the program after realizing her protests weren't working. The bad news, she'd made allegations about another resident that triggered a mandatory investigation. We have to take all allegations seriously, the coordinator said, even when we suspect they're deflection tactics. I could hear the exhaustion in her voice. My sister had been there less than 2 weeks and was already wearing down professionals who dealt with difficult teenagers for a living. That night, I found Mom crying in the kitchen. She was reading through old photo albums, looking at pictures of my sister as a toddler before the diagnosis, before everything went wrong. She looks so happy here, Mom whispered, touching a photo of my 3-year-old sister on a swing. What happened to that little girl? Dad wrapped his arms around her. She's still in there somewhere, that's why we're doing this. But doubt crept in as the days passed. More emails arrived from concerned strangers my sister had contacted. A child rights blogger picked up the story, painting my parents as monsters who locked away their daughter for breaking a phone. The comment section filled with threats and promises to save my sister. Someone leaked our address. Cars started driving slowly past our house, passengers taking photos. One woman actually knocked on the door and accused my parents of child abuse to their faces. Dad had to threaten to call the police before she left. Maybe we should bring her home, Mom said one evening, exhausted after another confrontation with a stranger. This is destroying our lives. That's exactly what she wants, I said. Don't you see? She's doing the same thing she always does, just from farther away. If you bring her home now, she wins. And it'll be worse than before because she'll know she can break you. My parents looked at me in surprise. I rarely spoke up about my sister's behavior, usually just trying to stay out of the crossfire. But watching them suffer while she orchestrated chaos from 100 miles away made something snap inside me. She's been controlling this family since she was 5 years old, I continued. Every vacation ruined, every holiday destroyed, every family event turned into her show. And now, even locked in a facility specifically designed to help her, she's still pulling the strings. When does it end? Dad squeezed my shoulder. You're right, we can't give in now. The facility must have implemented new strategies because the chaos suddenly stopped. No calls for 3 days, no new emails or social media posts. The silence felt ominous after 2 weeks of constant crisis. When the coordinator finally called, she sounded cautiously optimistic. Your daughter has had a breakthrough, she said. She's participating in individual therapy and showing genuine engagement. Her therapist believes she's beginning to understand the impact of her behaviors. Mom gripped the phone tighter. Really? We're cautiously encouraged. She's written some letters as part of her therapy. Would you be open to receiving them? Reading them is entirely your choice. The letters arrived 2 days later, 3 envelopes, 1 addressed to each of us. I stared at mine for an hour before opening it. The handwriting was neat, controlled. The words felt rehearsed, hitting all the right therapeutic notes. She apologized for the scratches, acknowledged the pain she'd caused, and took responsibility for her actions. It was everything you'd want to hear. It was also completely hollow. I'd lived with my sister for 16 years. I knew her real apologies, rare as they were, came with specific details and usually backhanded compliments. This letter could have been written by anyone to anyone. It was perfect, and that's how I knew it was fake. My parents wanted to believe. I could see the hope creeping into their eyes as they read their letters. Mom even smiled at one part. Don't, I warned. Remember the suicide note? She's good at writing what people want to hear. The coordinator called the next day to check if we'd received the letters. Mom mentioned they seemed positive. Wonderful, the coordinator said. Then, almost as an afterthought, oh, I should mention, your daughter has requested to add some approved phone numbers to her call list. Standard procedure after showing progress. She's asked to add her Aunt Catherine and 3 school friends. Would you approve those additions? Dad and I exchanged glances. Mom hesitated. I'm not sure that's a good idea yet, she said slowly. Of course, you know your situation best, the coordinator replied. She was quite insistent about the aunt in particular, said she wanted to apologize for causing family drama. After Mom hung up, we sat in silence. The manipulation was subtle this time, almost elegant. Show progress, write apology letters, then immediately ask for access to the people most likely to help her escape. When denied, she could claim her parents were preventing her from making amends. She's getting smarter, Dad said quietly. 2 days later, Aunt Catherine called again, this time furious. I just got off the phone with the facility, she snapped. They said you refused to let her call me. She's trying to apologize, and you won't let her. Catherine, Mom said patiently, think about this. How did you know to call the facility? What? Someone called and told you she was trying to reach you, but we blocked it. Who called you? Silence. I don't know. They said they were a patient advocate. The facility doesn't make those calls, Dad said. She found another phone. She's playing you. Catherine hung up, but I could tell she didn't believe them. The divide in our extended family was growing wider. Those who'd experienced my sister's manipulation firsthand supported my parents. Those who only saw the sweet, troubled teenager believed she was being abused. The facility's first progress report arrived at the 30-day mark. It was thorough, clinical, and concerning. While my sister was following rules and participating in therapy, she showed limited, genuine insight into her behavioral patterns and a continued tendency toward manipulation and deflection. The recommendation was for the full 90-day program with a possible extension. Mom set down the report with shaking hands. 3 more months of this, she murmured. But something shifted after that report. The crises stopped coming in waves. Days passed without emergency calls or unexpected visits. My sister was apparently focusing on the program, or at least pretending to. I should have known she was planning something bigger. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon, 45 days into her stay, not from the facility, but from the local news station. Mrs. Williams, this is Rebecca Chen from Channel 7 News. We're investigating reports of teenagers being held against their will at Peaceful Paths Treatment Center. Your daughter reached out to us with some serious allegations. Would you like to comment? Mom's face went white. How did she contact you? She participated in a family therapy session via video call and held up signs to the camera when staff weren't looking. Very clever, actually. She's provided us with what appears to be extensive documentation of abusive practices. We're running the story tonight with or without your comment. Dad grabbed the phone. That documentation is fabricated. Our daughter has a history of false allegations. We have proof. We'd be happy to review any evidence you have, Rebecca said smoothly. Can you come to the station this afternoon? They went. I stayed home watching the news with growing dread. The story aired at 6 p.m. Troubled teens or trapped teens, the headline read. They showed a photo of my sister from before the facility where she looked young and innocent. They mentioned the emails about abuse, the complaints to state agencies, and the family division. They interviewed a child advocate who'd never met my sister but spoke passionately about teenage rights. My parents' interview was edited down to 20 seconds of Dad saying, "She has a history of false allegations," making him look defensive and guilty. They didn't show the video of her applying fake bruises. They didn't mention the previous CPS investigation or the oppositional defiant disorder diagnosis. Our phone rang off the hook. Reporters, concerned citizens, angry strangers who'd seen the news. Someone started a free Sarah Williams Facebook page that gained 1,000 members overnight. Mom turned off her phone and sat at the kitchen table, head in her hands. We can't win. No matter what we do, she turns it against us. The facility knows the truth, Dad said, but his voice lacked conviction. The facility called the next morning. The coordinator sounded stressed. We've been fielding calls all night, she admitted. Our board is meeting this afternoon to discuss the situation. Your daughter's treatment team still recommends she complete the program, but the publicity is a problem. You're kicking her out? Mom's voice cracked. No, we're exploring options. There are other facilities, less visible ones, or intensive outpatient programs. We're not abandoning your daughter, but we need to consider what's best for her treatment and our other residents. After they hung up, my parents sat in defeated silence. 45 days of fighting, and my sister was about to manipulate her way out of the one place equipped to handle her. That evening, something unexpected happened. The news station called back. "Mrs. Williams, Rebecca Chen again. We've received some interesting information since our broadcast. 3 families have come forward saying your daughter made similar false allegations against them when she didn't get her way. One has video evidence. We'd like to do a follow-up story." The tables were turning, but I felt no satisfaction, just exhaustion. My sister had turned our lives into a public spectacle. Even vindication came at the cost of more exposure, more judgment, more strangers thinking they knew our family's business. "Do the story," Mom told Rebecca. "Show everyone exactly who she is." But I wondered if it would matter. My sister had learned to weaponize public sympathy, and there would always be people ready to believe, a crying teenager over exhausted parents. The facility's decision came through crystal clear. They were transferring my sister to a more secure location in another state. Mom gripped the phone so hard her knuckles went white as the coordinator explained their reasoning. "The media attention is disrupting treatment for all our residents. We've arranged placement at Mountain Ridge Therapeutic Center. It's smaller, more isolated, better equipped for cases requiring intensive intervention." Dad took the phone. "When?" "Tomorrow morning. We'll handle the transfer. No outside transport team this time. Our own staff will manage it." My sister must have sensed something was happening because the facility called back within an hour. She had barricaded herself in the recreation room with 2 other residents and was demanding to speak to the news reporter who'd covered her story. The coordinator sounded frazzled. "We're handling it, but I wanted you to know she's escalating again." That night, Rebecca Chen's follow-up story aired. The 3 families who'd come forward were interviewed in shadow, voices disguised. One showed security footage of my sister destroying their property after they'd refused to buy her concert tickets. Another had recordings of her threatening their elderly grandmother. The 3rd family's story made my blood run cold. She'd accused their teenage son of assault when he'd rejected her romantic advances, nearly destroying his college prospects before video evidence cleared him. Our phone exploded again, but this time with apologies. People who'd attacked my parents online were backtracking. The Free Sarah Williams page lost half its members overnight. Several reporters called, wanting to interview my parents about teen manipulation tactics. Mom refused them all. "We're not turning our daughter into a cautionary tale for clicks." The next morning, chaos erupted at the facility. My sister had somehow gotten word about the transfer. The coordinator called at 6 a.m., voice tight with stress. "She's on the roof, threatening to jump if we don't let her call her aunt. The police and crisis team are here." My hands shook as I listened to Mom's side of the conversation. Dad paced the kitchen, jaw clenched. We could hear sirens through the phone. 2 hours later, another update. They talked her down using a negotiator who specialized in adolescent crisis intervention. She'd been sedated and placed on one-to-one supervision until the transfer. "This is exactly why she needs more intensive treatment," the coordinator said. "Mountain Ridge has experience with extreme behaviors. They'll help her." But my sister wasn't done. That afternoon, while supposedly sleeping off the sedation, she managed to scratch a message into her arm using her fingernails. "Help me!" When the nurse discovered it during a routine check, my sister claimed staff had done it while she was unconscious. The facility immediately photographed the wounds, documenting that the angle and depth were consistent with self-infliction. They also pulled security footage, showing no staff had entered her room during the time frame, but she'd already taken photos, with a contraband phone, and sent them to every contact she could find. Aunt Catherine showed up at our door that evening, hysterical. "Look what they did to her!" She shoved her phone in Mom's face, showing the scratched message. "This is torture." Dad pulled up the facility's documentation on his tablet. "Look at the angle, Catherine. Look at the security footage timestamps. She did this to herself." Catherine wouldn't listen. She threatened to file for emergency guardianship, to contact every news outlet in the country to camp outside the facility until they released my sister. "Go ahead," Mom said quietly. "Add your name to the list of people she's manipulated. When she turns on you, and she will, remember this moment." Catherine stormed off, but I saw doubt creeping into her expression. The transfer happened at dawn. The facility called to confirm my sister was secured in the transport vehicle with 2 staff members and a nurse. She refused sedation but was cooperating after being told the alternative was restraints. Halfway through the 8-hour drive, she convinced the nurse she was having an allergic reaction to something she'd eaten. When they stopped at a hospital, she locked herself in a bathroom and started posting on social media from another contraband phone. "Being kidnapped right now. Interstate 80 near Millville exit. Black van, license plate RMH 4921. Please help." The posts went viral within minutes. Someone called in a kidnapping report. Police pulled over the transport van with guns drawn while my sister filmed everything from the back seat, screaming about her rights. It took 3 hours to sort out. The officers reviewed the transport papers, facility documentation, and court orders. They spoke to my parents by phone, contacted the facilities, and even called the judge who'd signed off on the treatment order. Meanwhile, my sister live-streamed the entire thing, painting herself as a victim of the system. When the police finally cleared the transport to continue, my sister's mask slipped. The officer's body cam caught her snarling at the staff, promising to destroy their careers, their families, their lives. That footage would prove crucial later. Mountain Ridge Therapeutic Center sat nestled in the mountains, 2 hours from the nearest town, with no cell service, limited internet access, and staff trained in dealing with the most challenging cases. When my sister arrived, she immediately demanded to speak to a lawyer. "Of course," the intake coordinator said calmly. "We'll arrange a consultation within 72 hours, as per state regulations." She tried her usual tactics over the following days: fake injuries, threats of self-harm, attempts to turn residents against staff, but Mountain Ridge had seen it all before. The response was consistent, professional, and impossible to manipulate. On day 3, she made her biggest mistake. During a group therapy session, she accused a staff member of inappropriate conduct. The accusation was serious enough to trigger an immediate investigation, but Mountain Ridge had protocols. All sessions were recorded with consent forms signed at admission. The video showed the staff member maintaining appropriate boundaries, while my sister grew increasingly frustrated that her manipulation wasn't working. It also caught her whispering to another resident about her plan to get rid of the therapist by making false accusations. The other resident, tired of being pulled into drama, reported the conversation. When confronted with the evidence, my sister exploded. She attacked the therapist, leaving deep scratches on his face before being restrained. That assault added criminal charges to her file. Mom and Dad had to fly out for the legal proceedings. I stayed home, fielding calls from relatives and dealing with the ongoing social media storm. The narrative was shifting, though. More families came forward with stories. My sister's pattern became undeniable. The judge at her hearing was unsympathetic. He'd reviewed her history, the false CPS reports, the documented threats, the pattern of escalation. He ordered continued treatment at Mountain Ridge with no possibility of early release, plus probation upon completion for the assault. My sister's reaction was volcanic. She screamed threats at the judge, our parents, the lawyers, everyone in the courtroom. Security had to carry her out while she raged about lawsuits and revenge. That night, Mom called me from their hotel. She sounded broken. The facility psychiatrist thinks she might have more than oppositional defiant disorder. They're evaluating for personality disorders. This could be a longer journey than we thought. Over the following weeks, the chaos gradually subsided. Without access to phones or social media, my sister couldn't orchestrate her campaigns. The facility implemented a strict behavioral program with clear consequences. Progress was measured in tiny increments: a day without threats, a therapy session without manipulation, a meal eaten without incident. Rebecca Chen did one final follow-up story, interviewing experts about adolescent manipulation and the importance of consistent boundaries. She included resources for families dealing with similar situations. The piece was respectful, factual, and helped shift public perception away from the sensationalized narrative my sister had crafted. 2 months into her stay at Mountain Ridge, we received our first genuine letter from my sister. Not the rehearsed apologies or manipulation tactics, but something raw and real. She wrote about feeling empty inside, about the exhaustion of maintaining her false personas, about fear that she didn't know who she really was underneath all the lies. The therapist warned us not to get too hopeful. This could be another manipulation tactic, or it could be the beginning of real work. Time will tell. We chose cautious optimism. Mom and Dad started their own therapy to process the years of trauma. I joined a support group for siblings of kids with behavioral disorders. The house remained peaceful, but we all knew this was just the beginning of a very long road. The money from selling her Christmas gifts had covered my phone replacement with enough left over for the growing legal fees. As I held my new phone, I thought about how a simple gift disparity had triggered this avalanche. But really, it had been building for 13 years. Mountain Ridge extended her stay to 6 months, then 9. Each family therapy video call showed tiny changes, moments of genuine emotion, flashes of accountability, brief glimpses of the girl she might become if she did the work. We learned to celebrate small victories while preparing for setbacks. The day finally came when she completed the program. She looked different, tired, but clearer somehow. The wild rage in her eyes had dimmed to something more manageable. She apologized to each of us individually with specifics and without excuses. She acknowledged the harm, the fear, the chaos she'd created. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said quietly. "I just want you to know I see it now. All of it." We brought her home to a structured environment, daily therapy, regular substance testing, limited privileges that could be earned through consistent behavior. She attended a therapeutic school with kids facing similar challenges. Some days were harder than others. The urge to manipulate still surfaced when stressed, but she was learning to recognize and redirect it. 6 months later, she successfully completed her probation. The assault charge was expunged from her juvenile record, conditional on continued treatment. She started volunteering at an animal shelter, finding peace in caring for creatures who couldn't be manipulated or threatened. Our family dinners were quiet now, but genuine. We could disagree without explosions. Boundaries were maintained without threats. It wasn't perfect. Healing rarely is. But for the first time since she was 3 years old, we were actually functioning as a family.